Your Excellency, welcome to Cape Talk. It's great to have you.
Yeah, thanks. It's beautiful to be here in Cape Town. Thanks.
How long have you been in Cape Town?
Well, we came for the last 2 or 3 days. Luckily enough, we arrived with sun and we're living with rain.
And you are familiar with both.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily as cold as it is today.
No, it's okay. It's pretty much okay.
I must admit, I was in your country once. I was blown away because I flew in from Cancun and the plane was full. There was about 5 South Africans. We were 5 in total, and the rest of the plane full of Americans. We got to immigration. They stamped my passports, but the Americans didn't want their passports stamped, and it wasn't stamped.
Yeah, definitely. It happens.
What was that all about?
Well, Americans are not allowed to go to Cuba by the U.S. government, so imagine that.
But the plane was full, and I imagine there were more planes that were full.
They were defined. They were getting the beach.
What was it about? Well, Americans have been attracted to Cuba for a very long time. Some of the greatest artists spent plenty of inspired time in Cuba, wrote a lot about Havana.
Yeah, definitely. Cultural relations between both countries have been very close for many, many years, especially in the music sector. There's a lot of musicians from both sides that move up and down, showing the quality. I mean, Cuban musicians are really, really good. Of course, Americans are also very good, and that exchange is natural.
I did tell you that I lived in Casa de la Música when there was a lot of good music happening there, and I certainly did a lot of time with the musicians. Then there was Madiba, President Mandela's funeral, and there was Raúl Castro shaking hands with Obama, and I was like, this is big, this is huge. I just thought that the blockade would come to an end right there, or that was at least the start to some normalization of relationships. I'm sure Cubans had that hope too.
Yeah, well, definitely that was a very interesting time in which the American government, especially President Obama, realized that the blockade on Cuba was really useless. I mean, there was no use for that one. And he decided a brave step to normalize relations with Cuba, open up an embassy, have diplomatic relations, get out of the way some of the restrictions that were at the executive level for him to remove. And that allowed for some rapprochement between both countries, yeah.
And you say that the rapprochement was good? There was a real possibility of normalization?
Definitely was good. Definitely was good. There was a lot of opportunities for both countries to develop. For us, definitely it was. Cuba has always been open to dialogue and to relations with the U.S. It's just that the American politics works in a certain way that the Cuban issue has always been an obstacle to go forward for us. So, but Cuba has been open for that relation, for that conversation, for that interaction. And we demonstrated it when, as you're talking about, when Obama made the brave step to say that the blockade was useless basically, and they would need a better approach towards Cuba, which was opening up America to Cuba.
Yeah, and the history of that blockade is rooted in the Cold War, is it not? It's capitalist, communist.
Definitely is rooted in that, and most of the sanctions that followed throughout the years have been tightened throughout the years. I mean, Cuba, because of our own socialist system, it does pose an example to the rest of the world. An example of cooperation, an example of solidarity, an example of helping out people in need in other countries. So that's what we've put forward. And I think maybe that's one of the reasons that we still have this dilemma with the U.S.
I would imagine that Cuba may have changed since I've been there. Fidel Castro was still president, and I didn't meet anybody. I was looking hard to find a beggar, to find somebody that was unemployed. Was there zero unemployment?
Yeah, well,
free healthcare, free tertiary education. What is the status of those kind of things?
Yeah, well, since the incipient steps by the Cuban Revolution in the 1960s, one of the main goals was to make people move in life, grow, not only professionally but also in their daily lives. So yes, of course, we have a big safety net for all Cuban citizens. Hunger in Cuba is not an issue. I mean, today the situation is different. I'm talking about the time that you went to Cuba in 2003. That definitely we were in a position that we were not perfect, definitely, but we did have very good safety nets for the people to have a good life.
Show me
of
perfection.
Course, yeah,
show me perfection.
Yeah, but I always say to people, look, Cuba, we would have been in a much better position if it were not for the sanctions by the U.S. I mean, we have never had an opportunity to develop and to put in place our social system in the best way possible. I mean, if you get sanctions to Commerce International, if you get people not allowed to go to Cuba, like the American citizens to go to Cuba, if you are constantly harassed and every time you cannot use the US dollar, you cannot use the international banking system. So how are we able to demonstrate that our system works? We have demonstrated it works, but we think it would have been better, even better, if we not had the sanctions from the US.
Cubans very resourceful nation, despite that blockade, and I think it would have been a very difficult one, a very bruising one that you would have experienced this block. I see that resourcefulness play out on the roads of Cuba, those 1950s cars in perfect condition. Why is it that you're so resourceful? But I think it's also maybe the blockade that made you resourceful. You had to survive.
Exactly. You're spot on. I mean, Cubans have developed this creativity and this sense of trying to go forward in life no matter what problems you have. So, of course, from the need of having things done and not being able to change your daily items on a regular basis, we are very resourceful. I mean, those American cars, even today, are still working there. For more than a century, some of them already. I mean, what?
Wow!
We are in 2026. There are 100-year-old cars still moving. Of course, they don't have the same engine. They don't have the same, because we adapt and we do things. Even today, with the acute crisis in Cuba of oil crisis, there is no electricity or no gasoline, no diesel. So people are adapting like solar panels to bikes. So you're like, what? And it's nothing professional. It's people, handling their daily lives. They have to move. They have to take goods this side. There's no gasoline. Okay, we'll do solar panel on top of the bike, and we put a battery and we go forward. Yeah.
But even the most resourcefulness that you can show as a nation is not going to be enough in the response to the current blockade. I believe it's really bad at this moment in time. Maybe you can tell us just about what a day in the life of a Cuban is like.
Yeah, it's sad. It's sad to see our citizens in this situation. I think the position that we've been put on by the U.S. Trying to. I mean, every day we are managing to live. Cuba relies on foreign imports of oil. We are an island. We don't have borders. We cannot bring trucks of oil. We have to ship them in. And Cuba, to function, it needs from 6 to 8 shipments of oil every single month to function on a normal basis, to produce electricity, to put petrol in cars, to have the logistical things moving around the country. And we've only received 1 shipment of oil in 5 months. 1. And which was the Russian tanker ship that bravely defied what Americans was saying, because America basically instructed the rest of the world to say, if you send oil to Cuba, if you even sell oil to Cuba, we'll tariff you, we'll sanction you. So, of course, countries have to take into account their own national interests first, And it's difficult because how can you modify? It's not only a blockade on Cuba, it's a blockade on other countries that they cannot sell oil to Cuba like they used to before.
A message in, it reads, please thank the guests for the unbelievable sacrifices made by the Cubans to save Angola from Portuguese and South African threat. Many died. I think that's part of our recent history, and that is why Cuba is so very close to us. I think the Cuban presence there had a lot to do with independence that Namibians could celebrate in 1990 and us in 1994 as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Cuba's support for the liberation struggle in Africa is paramount. It's well known, and you can't really hide it. I mean, a country like Namibia, very good friends of ours. Their liberation struggle was ended by us.
SWAPO was in the trenches with the Cuban.
Definitely.
Back in the day, of course, South Africa was in the opposing trenches. We've changed so much in 30 years. The people in the trenches with you now rule here. How's the Cuban-South African relationship at this moment?
Cuban-South African relation is very healthy. I mean, we have a very close relation. We are constantly communicating, constantly exchanging, constantly coordinating, especially international issues like Palestine, like international order, like multilateralism. All those issues with South Africa are good. Bilateral relations are strong. We do have some of programs working between the two countries. You know, very well known the scholarship programs for South African students to go to Cuba and study medicine. We have more than 3,000 of those. Surely some of the listeners today are part of those groups.
Or treated by a doctor trained in Cuba. And the work that they do in our rural communities are certainly appreciated, our underserved communities. So let's just get back to the present crisis. We're not looking at an economic hurdle. We are looking at a humanitarian crisis. I believe it's impacting hospitals and so much more.
Definitely. The humanitarian crisis is looming in Cuba. I mean, hospitals cannot function without electricity. Hospitals cannot function if we are not able to import all the inputs and equipment that needs to be taken care of. We have lists. Long lists, thousands of people waiting to get operated. Remember, Cuba has a very wide health system, very big health system. Comparably to our size, we are 9 million citizens in a small island, but we have hospitals, we have clinics, we have family doctors, we have dentistry. Everything is up to date, and it was functioning perfectly. So the Cuban citizens are used to having healthcare, quality healthcare, free healthcare, and readily available healthcare. So today, that's one of the issues that is hampering the Cuban community. Delivery of those previous beneficiaries that we didn't have. We cannot have them now. So definitely, humanitarian issues are looming. Food is scarce also. How can you get the food that you produce in the countryside to the cities? Only Havana is about 2 million citizens. They solely rely on bringing food from the countryside, from the adjacent provinces. You have no oil in the trucks. How do you get that there? So yes, it's complicated. Life is difficult. We think this is not deserved. We do not deserve this type of treatment. And really, what is asked of us is very complicated. They're asking, the Americans are asking to change our political system, to remove the current leadership. Those are issues that only the Cuban people can decide upon.
And I've noticed very significant change from the time that I was there. Certainly more young people getting involved in entrepreneurship, maybe a small, little bit of trade happening out on that side as well.
Definitely. In Cuba, for the last 10 years, private enterprises have sprung everywhere. Especially small enterprises for young entrepreneurs.
Yes.
There are a lot of businesses in Cuba, private businesses, that have worked very nicely. Even some of them are providing national services already. So and this is with all the situation that we have, because even private business cannot thrive when they don't have oil or when they don't have electricity. So that is something that is hampering that sector too. But definitely, as you said before, Cubans are very creative, and there's a lot of potential for the entrepreneurs to do things there.
Yeah, there has been criticism about infrastructural development in tourism, maybe being out of sync with the kind of infrastructural investment needed into the people of Cuba. How would you respond to that criticism?
No, definitely. Look, when you have a development plan for a country, you cannot just cater for one sector or the other one. You have to make a balance in order for doing this. So tourism sector in Cuba is a driving force, has always been. Not today because of the situation. As I tell you, even flights have been canceled to Cuba because there is no jet fuel to provide to those airplanes that are coming in. But definitely for many years, the tourism sector was a driving force in Cuba. We received in 2018 nearly 5 million tourists, which might not seem too much compared to Dominican Republic, which receives maybe 10 to 12 million. But of those 10 to 12 million, 8 come from the United States of America, who have prohibited to travel to Cuba. So imagine if we had that opening, if we had that. So I think there's always a push. There's always a difficulty when you are investing in infrastructure. Where do you put money first? Where do you put later? So yeah, I think it comes into that play.
Yeah, but tourism would have been a big foreign currency.
Definitely.
And that's why it was important.
Yeah, and we also have to take into account that not all the investment in tourism infrastructure is done specifically with our resources. We also have joint ventures to develop tourism.
So private sector investment?
So private sector investment. So I mean, sometimes this is a little bit of a misinterpretation, misleading also. Oh, look at Cuba is building huge hotels and whatever. Yeah, not always is with our resources.
Somebody's taking a risk.
Yeah.
I wonder how those people feel that have taken a risk.
Yeah, we have very good international tourism hotels in Cuba, like companies like Meliá, like Iberostar from Spain. Some are from India, some from Singapore. Yeah, I mean, the industry is in a low point right now.
Yeah, it will. And when we're talking about a humanitarian crisis, this may kind of stoke public discontent and threaten the very nature of Cuba. Maybe that's by design. Maybe that's the blockade. If it's regime change that the Americans are looking for, that's what you say.
Yeah, American politics have been very cynical towards Cuba because constantly they're bombarding mainstream media, saying that the problems in Cuba, the hunger in Cuba, the lack of medicines and food in Cuba is because of local government mismanagement or prioritizing other areas or even robbing state funds. But they apply a blockade. They apply sanctions on countries who trade with us. They apply sanctions on countries who send oil to us, and then they blame us that these difficulties are our own making. It's very cynical. But the reality is Cubans are very politically knowledgeable. People in Cuba are well versed. I mean, when I say people, I say ordinary citizens, people who are in the market, households, citizens. All of them are very knowledgeable in politics. So people know how politics works. But what can I say? You know, when you have difficulties and you have a point where people are suffering, it really doesn't even matter who the cause is. Yeah. You know, I think, of course, America is trying to have a social uprising in Cuba. It's what they're aiming for, but people understand what's going on. So it's not easy. People understand it's difficult, but people understand that it's the U.S. the cause of this one.
We came from rapprochement, as you said, with Barack Obama after shaking hands with President Raul Castro at Madiba's funeral in Johannesburg. That was a TV moment, and the whole wide world focused on that particular moment and the potential of that moment on the future. And then, of course, Donald Trump came into power thereafter and immediately dismantled whatever rapprochement.
Immediately. It was like not even a month afterwards. Trump took down all of the executive orders that Obama had put in place in order to advance diplomatic and bilateral relations with the U.S. That was the first, with the sign of the pen. And later on, he took more actions, especially towards those areas which are key for development, which we have talked about, tourism. They canceled all cruise ships going to Cuba. And that was one big source of income for Cuba because many ships were going to Cuba.
But that rapprochement probably is the reason for the private sector investment in your hospitality industry.
It was because I can remember very clearly in Old Havana, which you visited when you went there. It's a very picturesque area of the city. Citizens were already adjusting their homes to make them Airbnbs. And most of them were adjusting their living spaces to accommodate small restaurants because people wanted to feel how was it to be with a Cuban, and everybody got an income. And I'm not talking about state income. This is not enriching the Cuban state. It's ordinary citizens who were catering for themselves, who were working and gaining money and going forward in life.
A couple of messages in. I attended the screening of this powerful film last night where the ambassador spoke. The amazing resilience shown by the Cuban people under the relentless attack from the U.S. must be applauded. What does the ambassador say about the latest U.S. decision to indict Raul Castro for the drowning of the two brothers to the rescue planes decades ago.
Yeah, this is part. The U.S. it's building a case, a false pretext case on Cuba to justify a military aggression. We can see it very clearly. I mean, you get sentences like Cuba is a threat to the United States of America.
Well, there's a pattern there. There's a pattern that we've seen in the past.
Yeah, definitely. And this indictment on former President Raul is completely ridiculous. I mean, this is something that happened 30 years ago, which was clearly demonstrated that it was a huge violation of international law. And I mean, we are talking about small planes coming from Florida, coming into a Cuban airspace, flying over Havana, throwing things to the people.
Testing your resolve.
And not even asking for permission, with no permits, with nothing. They would warn 27 times that you are illegally doing this. The American government was informed officially of this aggression from private citizens, but we know they were funded by the U.S. to do this. And we decided sovereignly to defend ourselves because one day is a pamphlet and the other day is a bomb.
Colin Taylor writes, good morning, Clarence and guests. Was fortunate to visit Cuba 20 years back. Hired a car, visited a month. Did you go to the south? Traveled the length and breadth of your most wonderful country. Appreciated the warm welcome, the vibrancy, the landscape, the beaches, and most of all the people. A truly memorable experience. So sorry things are tough for the beautiful people of Cuba. It was great not to come across an American tourist, actually, says Colin. And then Tony says, despite the flowery language, Cuba is a dictatorship and the people oppressed. I was expecting to find more of that. I'm surprised, actually. There wasn't more of that.
Well, I mean, everybody can have their own opinion. The reality is...
Go and check it out for yourself.
Yeah.
That's what I would suggest.
Yeah.
And if anything, I just thought, I concluded that Cuban people are amazingly social people.
Yeah. Cuban people are very warm.
And that sense of joie de vivre I got there in a country, and I maybe expected differently because of the kind of propaganda that's doing the rounds. Maybe you must go and experience it for yourself. I didn't encounter one Cuban that had issues. They were happy with their culture, happy with their music, and happy to have us there celebrating them with them. Thank you for your time, Your Excellency Fakri Rodriguez Pinelo, Ambassador of Cuba in South Africa, and maybe just a little closer to the suffering that Cubans are undergoing right now.